Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, and welcome to a Q&A for, I, I mean, I now feel embarrassed about it, but like a training I am so fucking super excited about that I have been dying. I've been gagging for today to come around so I could talk about it to people. I thought what I would do, since the purpose of this call is very much to answer any questions you might have that will about joining the program. To answer kind of the two that I figure, whether they are formally asked or not, will be on everyone's mind. And the first one is, what is it? And the second is, why should I do it? So I'm going to do those two, and then I'd love genuinely whatever question will help you know whether or not you want to come along. So there are two Syd quotes that for me are at the heart of what it is to be a teacher of the principles of the inside out understanding. And the first one is when he talks about how people rise in consciousness, how people go deeper, what it is that changes people's lives. And he would describe that most often in what I heard as a shift in consciousness. So when somebody's experiences a shift in consciousness, a leap in consciousness, a jump to a new level, their world changes, their experience of the world changes. If you want to help people, you can try to help people, he would say. But if you really want to help people, show them a new world and get out of the way. Well, that new world is a new level of consciousness. And he would say that there's really only two ways that people shift levels of consciousness: listening for truth and searching for beautiful feelings. Now, notice it's listening for truth, not listening to truth. You can hear truth everywhere because if it's true, it's everywhere. And sometimes he would say, instead of searching for beautiful feelings, resting in beautiful feelings. So in other words, when we are in the peace and quiet of mind, our level tends to rise. It's like the elevator going up. When we are seeing truth, and I'll talk a little bit more about what that looks like to me, we go up. So that kind of gives us a working definition for what it is to teach the principles. We're pointing to truth, and we're sharing beautiful feelings. Now, I say pointing to truth because truth isn't ours. That would be our truth. That wouldn't be truth. So I can't share truth particularly. It's like I can point to it. And if I want to point to truth, I'm going to be pointing to the formless, because that's where truth with a capital T is. Once it's in form, it's subjective. Once it's in form, it might be truthful, but it isn't truth with a capital T. Truth with a capital T is the formless dimension of life. Now, when we look to the formless dimension of life, when we are pointed to and we look where we're pointed, then we start to see things that are just true about how life works, about how we're made, about what we are, and about what's possible. And that's a really helpful to know where to point. But probably of more unique value, like why there's a training element to the training. And it's not just, okay, see ya, have fun, change the world. Don't forget to pet your dog, maybe adopt a kitten. I don't know. The reason that there's more is because actually the skill is getting people to look where you point. Now, if you don't know where to point, obviously you're not going to be very facile at pointing there. But there is a skill to getting people to look where you're pointing. and it's to do with receptivity, and it's to do with credibility. And those are things that we'll talk about, where they come from, how they work. Now, part, the other part of the definition of what it is to be a teacher of the principles is sharing beautiful feelings. Here, sharing is quite deliberate, because if we don't have them, we can't share them. And what so many people who try to share the principles wind up sharing is their insecurity, their doubt, their embarrassment, their bravery and courage under fire, their the feelings that come with thinking I'm supposed to be able to do something that I don't quite believe I can do, and that's the feeling that winds up getting shared. Sometimes it's arrogance is the feeling that winds up getting shared. I know something you don't know, and when you know it, you'll be as cool as I am. So the feeling being shared is arrogance. Now, interestingly, and I don't know if you've noticed this, people don't really respond beautifully to arrogance, insecurity, and doubt. It's discouragement and hopelessness. It's curious, but it seems true. People respond really well to love. They respond really well to aliveness. They respond really well to quiet and presence and the simple feeling of being. They respond really well to delight. And so, a huge part of being an effective teacher of the principles is living in those feelings enough that you can share them, that they become the flavor of your pointing. Now, the second quote, I said I was going to kind of use two quotes to talk about why I'm talking about it this way, is one I know a lot of people have heard me share or they heard Syd share. And it's where he says, if you're listening to this and you find yourself in a nice feeling, pop the cassette out of the tape player, give it a little kiss, toss it out the window, and stay with the feeling. Because the feeling has information in it. The feeling becomes your teacher. So in that sense, everything that we do as teachers is designed to wake people up to this deeper dimension of life. Sometimes because we point them to it directly. Sometimes because they fall into it when they catch the feeling. And it doesn't matter. One's not better than the other, but both roads lead to Rome. Both roads lead to home, and it's being at home in yourself that leads to transformation. So that for me is what it is to be a teacher of the principles. Pointing to truth, pointing to the formless dimension of life, the deeper dimension of life, and the truth of how we're made and how the equipment works. And then all of that inside the context of and for the purpose of resting in the deeper dimension of feelings, the world of deeper feelings. Now, what that looks like can be absolutely anything. So I was thinking of a couple of very different ways I've taught the principles over the years. And I was thinking back to, and I don't know, Lynn, do you remember when I did Brazil? Was it like 2016 or?
Yeah, 2016, maybe early 2017.
Yeah. So I was brought in to speak to 300 people in the medical equipment industry in South America. So there were about 200 separate companies represented at this conference. And the remit I was given for the talk, and it was an hour talk, was we want the people to realize, to wake up to the fact that this industry is heading off a cliff. That right now people are still making money, but if we don't start to take into account the ways that the world is changing in the industry and medicine is changing, we're gonna make money right up until we're bankrupt. And we want you to wake people up to that. And we want them to leave filled with hope for the future. Okay, go. And it was such a paradoxical ask. But I knew that what I would be teaching was the principles. I knew that I would be pointing to truth and sharing beautiful feelings. And I didn't know what form that would take. Well, the form it wound up taking was I got Lynn to send 300 jars of Play-Doh to Brazil. and we had them under everybody's seat, and we got them to play with the Play-Doh. And I had them create different things out of Play-Doh, but then ultimately I had them create a visual out of Play-Doh of how they felt the industry was going. And I remember one CEO created a little, like the bars of a prison, and held it in front of his face. And somebody else actually did create a little car going off a little cliff. And, they were very creative. And I talked about the nature of thought, the Play-Doh of the universe. And I showed them the difference between, like, okay, so the car's going off the cliff, so turn the car around, so now the car's driving away from the cliff. And okay, you're in prison, but break out. But then the moment where there was a real shift was the moment I said, now take whatever you've created and mush it back up and create something that's your vision for how this industry could be. Now, some of them just found that a really helpful shift in perspective. Some of them woke up to a whole different feeling, a whole different level of consciousness around their business. Some of them had insights from feedback I got into the nature of thought and its impact more generally. So I was teaching the principles, but they didn't know that. I went into a company in Sweden, and I've done a couple of virtual trainings for their people, and did one on productivity. And in the productivity training, we talked about the nature of the mind and how when the mind is full, we just don't have much capacity for anything, and we struggle, and one more thing feels like it's going to blow us up. But when we have spare capacity, when we have headspace, we can take a lot of things in our stride and be incredibly creative and productive. I was pointing to truth from a really nice presence, a really nice feeling. And so people settled into the feeling, and they started to get inspired about possibilities. Same exact thing I was teaching in the same exact way, but it would have looked completely different. And again, at no point did I talk about the principles. Here's a third one. I do a program every year, I'm guessing a bunch of you have been on it, called the Advanced Course. And all I do in the Advanced Course is talk about the principles. I don't talk about any practical implications. I don't talk about what to do with them. We just spend 3 weeks in whatever way occurs to me that year looking at the nature of these principles. And people have all sorts of insights. What am I doing? I'm pointing to truth. I'm pointing to the formless dimension of life and what that reveals about how things work in the form. And I'm doing it from a place of really nice, quiet presence, really alive beingness. So that's what we're going to be learning. How to do that and how to get really good at it. Like, I don't know how good we're going to get in 9 months. Probably depends partly on where we start, right? If you've never done any kind of teaching before, that may help. I don't know. That may mean you get it quicker because there's less to unlearn. It may mean it takes a bit longer. I don't know. But the direction of travel will be really clear. And because of the simplicity of it, it won't take you as long as you think to start to get a degree of confidence and excitement about it. One of the things that I was an inspiration behind this training, was noticing how many people struggled to share the principles with their family, or to share the principles at work, or to share the principles, when it mattered. And inevitably, when I would ask questions, I'd find out that they were trying to get people to buy into the words, right? I told them about mind, consciousness, and thought, and they just got mad at me. Well, yeah, that's not weird. I told them that everything they think about life is wrong, and they seem to not take it well. Again, not that surprising, really. One of the things we will be spending a fair bit of time talking about is how much of people's response to this is predictable. And because it's predictable, we can take it into account in how we teach, in how we present. And there are different things that are a bit different industry to industry and vibe to vibe. But here's the thing. I've never met anyone who wanted to share this with their family, or share this at work, or share this in some other context, who wouldn't have just been satisfied if the people that they were sharing with started to live their life in nicer feelings and be less rocked by circumstances. Well, that's called sharing the feeling. And then if they happen to pick up on the language and the explanations, that's great. But there is no context on earth where you can't share beautiful feelings and have it make a difference. So that's why that's the focus. That's why that's the title. Now, the second question is why? And you're the only one who can answer that. And you might not even be able to answer that. I would guess, I think we got 31 people booked already. And I would guess that if I asked, 17 of them would not quite know why they booked. But I can tell you why I think becoming a teacher, not again necessarily as a job description, but being able to share this, being able to share this feeling, being able to point more consistently and effectively to the formless in a way that people can hear it and are impacted by it, why you might want to do it. And one is just you're called to. You don't know why. It's just like, yeah, this is for me. I don't even know what the fuck. I mean, I'm a plumber. I don't know how this is going to play out. I'm a recluse. I know 3 people. I don't know, but I know to do it. That's the best reason. I'll give you 2 other reasons that I think are pretty good, but the best one is that you just fucking want to, or you know to. Okay. Now, here's a second reason. You might want to make a difference in the world. And I know I'm saying it lightly, but I don't mean it dismissively. Like, that might be your call. You want to make a contribution to the well-being of the planet. You want to give back some of what you've gotten if you've been impacted by this, or even just blessed by life, graced by life with a beautiful form to your life. You might see it as a way to, like Syd did, a way to end suffering on the planet. You might see it as, boy, I'd love to help the smartest people in the room not act so stupid all the time. Like, that's individual, that's yours. And then the third reason is, man, you will never learn more than you will when you start teaching. Your grounding will not deepen quicker through anything you've done than it will when you start to teach. So I used to, when I was inadvertently sharing arrogance, not love, part of it was, well, yes, we don't have practices and principles. We don't do things. We just understand and imagine. And I meant it when I said it. I really did think that was true, until one day I realized, fuck, if that were true, then my worst month each year wouldn't be the month I take off from work. And I started to realize, oh, my practice is talking about the principles and pointing to truth and sharing beautiful feelings. I do it almost every day. I do it as consistently as most people, more consistently than most people's exercise or meditation routines. And I had to go on a new learning curve a couple of years ago so that I didn't have to teach in order to stay in the feeling of this. And that was fun. That was great. But I can tell you that the bar none fastest way to ground deeper is to teach. There's an expression, I think I put it in the description on the website, which is see one, do one, teach one. Right? If you really want to develop a mastery of something, you see it, you do it, and you teach it. There's an expression, I've shared this before, well, we teach what we most need to learn, and it's always an insult. And to me, it always just sounded like a strategy. So if I want to learn more about money, I take a look at what I see and then I teach because I know I'll see more in teaching. If I want to learn more about productivity, about creating, I see what I see and I start teaching it and then I see more. And if I want to understand more, experience more, learn more about the principles, guess what? I see what I see. I begin to share it. I begin to teach it and I see more. Now, I don't know if there is an order of um, abstract better reasons in that list. Like that, well, it's better if you want to change the planet, but it's okay if you just know. And well, it might just be, I don't care. Like, I don't think it matters. I think why ever you are drawn to do this, why ever you're on this call or listening to this Q&A, that's a good enough reason. But those are some of the most obvious ones, some of the most obvious benefits that I see.